Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Paddle Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional paddle presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 98, and as always, joined by my co-host Hugo here today. Hugo, it's great to have you on. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. I've got to be honest, missing you to a certain extent because you won't be around for a few days, given that you're, currently out in Italy sorting out your very imminent, surprisingly imminent wedding, which our eager fans will remember will be taking place soon. But yeah, all good my side. How about you? How's everything over there?
No, it's all good. I mean, I think most of the weekend, to be honest, we've just been kind of enjoying it. I mean, the weather's absolutely amazing here in Sardinia, and we've kind of been enjoying it. I think during the next couple of days is when it starts to get a bit hectic, and we're gonna, have to organize a couple of things. But it's all good. I mean, I think over on your side, it does seem like you're not missing me much, because you're obviously having a fantastic run, or at least a great start to the tournament you're playing. So I'm very happy, obviously, for you and for Jose as well. So hopefully you guys make a deep run into the tournament as well.
Well, yeah, early days. Obviously, we only won the first round. We'll be playing the second round in a few hours, and the level is pretty high. So, yeah, hey, it's a learning experience. But don't you worry, mate. We'll be back on the courts together sooner than later. That's for sure. I mean, as early as next week. So, not that long left.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, your success is kind of my success as well. Because given that we do play together quite a bit, obviously, it helps me as well. So, no, I mean, obviously cheering you guys regardless. Hopefully you have a really good run. But yeah, I mean, probably should get started on with the episode. I mean, what a tournament. To be honest, I probably should start with that. And I mean, it just seems like Premier Battle can't catch a break, to be honest. It just goes from when you think everything's kind of hit rock bottom and, things couldn't be worse and there couldn't be any more issues with tournaments. I mean, another one just comes up and something that we haven't seen before happens. And yeah, I mean, I don't know where to put it. I think let me just start by saying that obviously the probably the conditions I think were kind of the first things that we noticed that were a bit alarming as we went throughout the week. I mean, when I started seeing fans wearing winter jackets in the stadium, I was like, okay, this is a bit strange. And then I started seeing players wear thermals in obviously indoor. And I was like, okay, like what the hell? It must be like absolutely freezing if you're playing indoors and you're wearing thermals. I mean, it's just really weird. And then obviously I think that had a massive effect on the conditions of the court themselves, especially the center court. And actually Jorge Martinez in one of the broadcasts when he was commentating one of the matches, he was saying that it's the ball is the way it is and it bounces so low or so little because it's freezing in there. And then there's obviously reports as well that apparently the bathrooms were terrible and you could like smell them from, from kind of inside the stadium. So that's on one side. And then obviously next we also have the complete shit show and issue that happened in the quarterfinals, which had to delay the whole day because apparently the court was not set up correctly and there were like health and safety concerns because I think the back glass and the side glass it was like quite separate. Kind of players raised that and they were concerned that it could potentially break or separate. So then that caused the whole scheduled day to be delayed, and we had to get to the point where the men's quarterfinals and semis were played in the same day. And at least from one of the matches from the Galan and Navarro, which maybe we will talk about later, I think it definitely had an effect that they were playing in the same day because the match itself, I mean, when I was watching, I was like, what is this? Like the quality was so bad. And then obviously Galan had to retire. Maybe that wasn't necessarily linked because apparently he had a stomach bug. But I mean, just the match play itself, I thought was like, you could really see the effect that these players were knackered essentially. So yeah, let me just stop there because I could go on about 3 days about this. But I mean, Hugo, what were your thoughts of the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, you described it very well, and I don't think this is it's definitely not the highlight, but yeah, I mean, you with this Buenos Aires P1, you have on the one side probably the most passionate fan base in the world. Obviously, the Argentinians, who, as we know, love it when paddle and Premier Paddle takes place there, and they just love interacting during matches, and they are just very engaged fans, which is great to see. And funnily enough, I think another the world record of the maximum amount of attendance watching a paddle match in the stadium was beaten. I think it was over 16,000 people. So again, great.
The stadium was massive.
Yeah, and the stadium was huge. But everything that you described, I mean, Coello talking during the changeovers about the fact that it smelled like really bad in the stadium, that's wrong. Then, I mean, the fact that the whole quarterfinals day was postponed to the semifinals, which then made the semifinals really quite average in terms of the level, was really sad to see as well. Obviously, the fact that the courts, not just the fact that the court was incredibly slow, which, hey, it can have some people who are fans of that, others who aren't. I mean, I think courts that are incredibly slow sometimes aren't that attractive, but hey, I'm not against it every now and then. But the fact that the secondary court had very different conditions to the central court, and depending on where you played, you had to play one way or another, I think that's wrong. One thing is changing court conditions from one tournament to another, but not within the same tournament, because also, as we saw, sometimes you're scheduled to play on one court and then you get told that you actually get moved to the other court not soon before you're playing. And obviously, Coki and Tapia and Galán aren't going to suffer from that because they're mostly going to be playing on the court that they're told that they're going to be playing on. But for other pairs, it's tough. I mean, I was just thinking about one of the matches, which was Jofre Arroyo against Paquito Verga. And obviously, Paquito, loving slow courts, was massively benefited from the fact that they were playing on the central court. But actually, it was projected that they were going to play on the secondary court, which was going to be much better for. Also, I mean, actually, it kind of went back and forth a lot. And yeah, I just think overall, the organization was poor. The fact that the courts were a hazard for players is just like, I mean, that can happen in a random club or in a random average tournament, but not at the highest level of the sport. So moving on from that, I thought the week was full of surprises, which is obviously good to see. Again, not great to see that Galan obviously had to retire. That's sad to see. But I mean, maybe moving on, and maybe we could do it in a chronological order. I mean, obviously, as we all know, Coki and Tapia won. The final was an absolute spanking. I mean, there wasn't really much of a story there, 6-2, 6-2. I don't think there's too much to say other than the fact that Coki and Tapia were clearly superior and Paquito and Verga had nothing to do that day. But I think it's the other matches throughout the quarterfinals, the semifinals that are more interesting. So maybe, if you agree, we can kick off with Coki and Yanguas, who we haven't spoken about in a while. And I know a lot of our listeners will know this, but they lost in, was it the last 16? It wasn't even the quarterfinals, against Jofre and Arroyo, who obviously had a great week in Buenos Aires, and they are a good pair and good players on paper. But yeah, I mean, downhill over the last few weeks for Coki and Mike. I mean, they've underperformed for 3 straight tournaments now, i.e. not making the semifinals, which is what they're projected to do based on the fact that they're the 4th seeded pair and they don't have to meet any of the so-called big boys until the semifinals. So
that's what they had been doing as well.
Exactly. I mean, everyone was actually saying how well they were doing because they were making the semifinals week in, week out, and then losing to one of the big boys. And it's like, yeah, fair play. But now the story's completely changed. Now, I don't know whether Coki Nieto has been slightly injured throughout the last few weeks, because there are a few posts on social media, Yanguas saying, we haven't been able to play at our level, important to get back to our base, to our best and kind of recover. So I don't know whether Coki Nieto was suffering from a niggle or an injury or something. But, I mean, during that match specifically against Jofre and Arroyo, it just felt like they didn't really know how they were meant to win points. They weren't playing in a way which was generating scenarios where they had kind of opportunities to finish the point. And, okay, yes, that can be affected by the fact that the courts were quite slow. But then again, they were playing on the secondary court, which was faster. And I had a feeling that both Arroyo and Jofre were generating winners much more easily. Now, yes, they are more aggressive players, but hey, you're the 4th seeded pair. You should be winning this match. Gonz, did you get a chance to watch that match? What are your overall kind of thoughts on, or maybe just as a pair if you didn't watch the match?
No. I did get to watch it, and I think very much agree with what you said in terms of them not really understanding or figuring out how to essentially win the points and how to put Jofre and Arroyo in kind of uncomfortable situations. I feel like overall the pair, obviously we've seen from the results, it has decrease their level for sure. I think especially what's kind of concerning to me is more about the players who they've lost against. I think that's maybe the more concerning bit, because in Asunción they lost to Victor Ruiz and Chisco Gil. Now, obviously, in Buenos Aires, they've lost to Jofre and Arroyo. And I think that, Coki and Mike are definitely much better players than the ones I just mentioned. Not that they're bad players, of course, but it's just one of those where it's a bit of a head scratcher when you see the result and you watch the match. You're like, should they have really lost against them? Like, how did they lose against them? So a bit of a concern there, and we'll see. I mean, I think that overall they had obviously been playing super well, and as you said, kind of meeting expectations. But we'll see what this means going forward, because I think maybe we've mentioned it in the past, or if we haven't, I mean, Yanguas still is a super attractive player for a lot of players out there, and something like Augsburger Yanguas I think could be super interesting and potentially on the cards if his season or these results mean that they start going downhill. I also wonder as well if there's an element, and I think we discussed this when we first talked about the pair Coki and Mike, which we thought was kind of a bit unconventional, but it's the feeling of, I wonder if players have now kind of figured them out a bit, and obviously at the beginning they it's a new pair, you don't really know how they're going to play, you don't know where to kind of what they're comfortable with, what they're uncomfortable with, what are their weaknesses. But obviously as time goes by, you start playing them, as there's more kind of film to watch and to analyze them as a pair. Maybe now they've been found out, right? And I do think that overall there is a weakness to the pair, if you see what I mean. Obviously they are incredible players, but it's not that they're both players that have every single shot in their locker. Obviously, we know that Coki is a much, much more defensive player and has some sort of limitations in his offensive game, which obviously I think other players can maybe take advantage of. And Yanguas I would say is a very complete player overall. But if he has to take the load offensively, maybe they put him in some situations where they move him around the court well enough to then create the space to be able to attack him, because maybe Koki's not able to take like as many balls, for example, down the middle that he should, right? Or that a more offensive player would. So I think it's going to be interesting how they continue these next couple of tournaments. But for sure, the thing that has surprised me the most about them is like I said, the losses against players that you would seem, they should be beating them. And the fact that if there was something that was characteristic of them was their consistency. And now all of a sudden, they've had some results which kind of show the opposite of that. So it's just going to be interesting to see where they go. I mean, overall, I do think that this project has it has a short lifespan, because obviously I think we both know that Yanguas at some point is going to be with a very offensive or one of the top backhand players. At least he has the points, he has the level to be with one of those. I don't know, it was interesting at the beginning how it was a very solid project, and now let's see where things go.
Yeah, no, I'd very much agree with your points. I do think that if they have a few good tournaments up until the summer break, which if I'm not mistaken, what have we got? 2 or 3 tournaments left until then? Maybe 4. I mean, I know that the next tournament is obviously the major in Rome.
Yeah.
And then
so it's going to be big.
What have we got? I think there's another P1 or something like that. I mean, there's a few tournaments left.
Barcelona, P.
Yeah. I'd say if they meet expectations, say they make the semi-finals across those tournaments, which they may well do. I mean, they'll still benefit from the fact that they're the 4th-seeded pair. I think they'll believe in the project as long as a big dog doesn't call them. And obviously, I only really see that happening from Yanguas' perspective, because I don't really see any other forehand players that are higher ranked than Yanguas going for Coki. We've both spoken about this offline. We'd see Yanguas and Augsburger match up really well, and we'd see Cardona and Coki actually match up really well and almost replicate that Coki-Coello, obviously saving the distances, that partnership that did really well in the World Cup, right? And thumped the Super Pibes. So I could see those two things happening, but I think both pairs could potentially have a bit more to lose than to win from those changes, because Yanguas and Coki, They're currently sitting very comfortably as the fourth-seeded pair from a points perspective. I think they've got a decent margin, which means that they don't have to face the big dogs until the semi-finals. And we know how important that is. I mean, we've seen players like Juan say goodbye to Livac, and they were doing so well just because, you know, a higher seeded player was going for him. So that's their big advantage. And I think that's going to weigh a lot. And then from Cardona and Azurga's perspective, I mean, they've literally beaten all the top pairs this season. So are they actually going to be better off teaming up with Yanguas and Coki respectively? I actually don't think so. So, I mean, we'll see. I, funnily enough, do think that they'll stick together until the end of the season. I just have that feeling because of the point situation. I'm talking about Yanguas and Coki because of the point situation and the advantage that is. But you never know. I mean, with the summer looming and obviously a few tournaments left until then, if this momentum continues and with the big summer break, which often means a lot of pair changes and the therefore domino effect, I guess you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of players that you just mentioned which kind of would suit them. Obviously, as you said, from a points perspective, it's, you know, it's something to consider. Maybe it's not as positive as they would like, but still interesting options. I think, like you said, anyways, they are, except maybe those two players and obviously the ones above them, but we're not really going to take those into consideration for now. I think anyone else below them is probably not a shout or a candidate I would really take seriously, because as you say, you know, they're probably in a very comfortable position. It seems that, you know, there is some chemistry also from a personality point of view. It seems like they get along quite well. So I don't think there's any issues there. And like you said, it just feels like it's the kind of project that, you know, lasts until the end of the season, and then probably at the end of the season when there's like, you know, normally that big scramble, that they might find other players or that they'll want to play with. But yeah, I mean, interesting to see how, you know, they've gone from a really steady, really stable to kind of this bit of a dip in form. But we'll see obviously major coming up, and that's a huge tournament, so they can be very easily back on track.
No, agreed. And one final point, I do think their game styles match, even though the pair does have its weaknesses, as we've described, and the players individually. I mean, Coki, from an attacking perspective, he's much better than he used to be, but he can't be ultra aggressive. And then Yanguas, I think mentally is where what really lets him down the most. I mean, we even saw it, I think, against Arroyo and Jofre, just making the wrong decisions more than just making bad mistakes. It's just the decision making. But I do think their game styles match. I mean, you've got a backhand player who's actually more defensive and then a forehand player who's actually more attacking. So I think it works. It's just, there's a lot of very high level pairs on tour at the moment, and every tournament is a mission, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can see from the last couple of tournaments that at the end of the day, you know, I guess what Coello and Tapia are doing, what Galan are doing is just not the norm, right?
No.
The norm is that you know, there's tournaments where you're going to do well and there's tournaments where you're going to lose in the first couple of rounds because there's still, you know, the top 30, 40 is still incredible players.
Yeah, although what I was quite surprised about is these super slow conditions I thought would have been a perfect environment, particularly for Coki, but also for Yanguas. I mean, he said previously how he likes to play on these courts, and obviously with Coki, who's a defensive machine, I thought this was going to be like their perfect way to redeem themselves and have a great tournament. But hey, it just shows that you never know. Should we maybe move on to the quarterfinal match between Momo and John and Juan and Stupa?
I mean, speaking about slow conditions and who benefited from slow conditions, I think this is the perfect segue into that match and into these pairs. So yeah, go ahead.
No, literally. I mean, firstly, what a match. Yeah, I think it could actually...
That was my favorite match, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, I was going to say that. Although I very much enjoyed the Jofre Arroyo against Coki and Yanguas as well. I thought it was a great match. But yeah, I mean, for those of you who didn't see the score, it was 6-3 in the first set to Momo and John, then 6-3 in the second set for Juan, Lebron, and Stupa, and then Momo and John broke back, if I'm not mistaken, 3 times in the third set, having been broken previously, to make the tiebreak, saved a match point, and won the tiebreak.
A couple.
Well, there you go, a couple. So, yeah, I mean, won the tiebreak 7-6. My initial thoughts, and I'll pass the ball on to you, were that, and we have briefly discussed this offline, was that Lebrón was being the MVP right up until the point where it was a match point, and he went for 2 big smashes, made a mistake with both of them, Then it went back to juice. They lost that point. And when it was advantage to Momo and John to break back and make it 5-all, again, he went for a smash, got found out, and everything changed. So it just shows how even if you're being the best player in the match, 2 bad points can really change the momentum completely. I really felt like Stupa and Lebron were in control of that third set for so long. But Momo and John were just 2 absolute warriors. I mean, we know how much Momo loves playing on slow courts. He's just a machine. It's like a wall. Quite similar, actually, to what I thought Coki and Yanguas could be on a court like this. And then John just showing that patient side to his game that we've been lacking for so long, because it's not that we don't think he's a fantastic player. It's just that sometimes he goes for these random smashes when he doesn't need to. And I think the fact that the court's conditions didn't allow for that meant that he knew he had to be patient. And playing that game, he was sensational. I thought he was a differentiator in that third set, generating those biboras that Juan Lebrón was having to defend very low and leaving a lot of short lobs for both Momo and John to attack. I think that really kind of led the scheme of the points in that third set. Yeah, maybe Gons. I'll leave it over to you because I know you did want to share a few of your thoughts on this match, and then we can crack on again.
Yeah. So, I mean, a huge, obviously, statement win from Momo and John. I think it's the first time they kind of beat really a big pair, or at least one of the big dogs. And also the first time they made the semifinals this year. So obviously huge tournament from there, and kind of their best week of the year so far. And it's kind of what we've been lacking from them. I mean, they'd always kind of been around the quarterfinals, but then always losing to one of the top pairs. So good to see that side from them. I do think that obviously these conditions benefited them hugely, especially Momo, as we said, that is a defensive machine. And I mean, both of them are super fit physically and they can run around the court all day, but especially Momo, some of the saves he made defensively, I mean, they were unbelievable. And he seemed so comfortable, just like being at the back, throwing lob after lob after lob to both Stupa and Lebrón. And I think that really played into their hand. But I do think, as you mentioned, differentiator. I mean, I think both Momo and John had moments where, maybe one of them was a bit better than the other. Overall, obviously, they both played amazingly. But some of the moments from John Sanz I thought were amazing. And as you said, it's kind of the thing that we've been missing from him. And it's the thing that we always say about him is that his decision making is kind of what kind of lacks on his side, right? I mean, I think he's got all the shots. I mean, not that he smashes like Tapia or like Coello or like Galan, but he has a pretty decent smash. He has a very good rulo. He has a very, very good b-boy. Really, he can hit all the shots. And obviously being a lefty is a massive, differentiator and a massive benefit, massive advantage. So it's just a shame when he's got the quality that he has. And sometimes you see him kind of take unnecessary risks. How many times have we seen a stat line of John Sanz of something like, I don't know, 27 winners and 18 and 19 unforced errors or something like that, right? So it's always been that side. And I think this match in particular showed that, if he plays the way he did and, I guess constructing the point more and not necessarily going for it every single time and kind of trying to gain an advantage and playing the point out, it equals a win, right? And a win against obviously one of the best players in the world. So hopefully he does take notice. Not that obviously he doesn't, he can't play a smash, or obviously I think this was a bit of an extreme given the conditions were so slow. But if he's able to just adjust that bit of his game, I think that can, make him go a couple of levels higher. And I think in terms of Lebrón and Stupa, I think, to be honest, it's really easy. I think it would be really easy for me to come here and say like, oh, Lebrón shouldn't, you've got 2 match points. Why are you risking it? You know that the conditions are slow. But at the same time, before getting to those 2 match points, he had 2 incredible smashes, which they worked. And we know that the smash is one of his best shots. So to me, I think what I kind of take away from this match and overall the pair is still more on Stupa's side. I feel like he's the one that's kind of letting them a bit down at the moment. I don't want to go overly or too much criticism on Stupa because he's obviously back from an injury. So we'll see how he develops. But what I will say is that Lebrón, I think, is kind of playing some of the best paddle that we've seen him play in recent times and in recent memory. He's really doing, I feel like, a good job. So, obviously we'll see how Stupa kind of evolves and what the situation is like. But I just wonder, is Lebrón thinking like, I'm playing some of my best paddle, am I gonna waste this in a way? So we'll see. Obviously, a tough loss to take, but I think they're in a good state as long as Stupa kind of gets back to the level he was at pre-injury, because I think Lebron is playing some of the best paddle we've seen.
I think the issue with Stupa can very much be due to his injury. I mean, he had a horrendous performance the previous week, and I mean, he was leaving so many short lobs against Cardenales Burger, which is basically saying goodnight, because that's just stupid and pointless against them. But so it can be, it almost feels like it's a confidence thing, and Stupa's such a confident player. I think he's one of the most confident players on tour, because particularly, for example, with his smash, how many times does he go for that smash where he jumps up and it's right at the back of the court, and he doesn't mind if he, out of 15, he wins 8, he sees it as a positive thing and keeps going for it. And I think that's one of the things that makes him a great player. One of the greats is his confidence. So it just feels like he's lost it a bit. And I really do hope he gets that back, because I think based on Lebron's current level, I think they can really challenge the top pairs. I genuinely mean it. It feels that way. I mean, and it feels strange to say this, because obviously another upsetting week, losing against a lower seeded pair. I mean, how the story would have changed if they'd won that, match 7-6. Sorry, well, it would have been 6-4 if I'm not mistaken, if Lebron had won that smash. And then they go on to the semi-finals to play Coki and Tapia. And you never know, because Coki and Tapia, even though they won this week, and even though they had a very comfortable final, they struggled a little bit in the quarterfinals, and who knows if they played Lebron and Stupa, who are obviously on paper a better matchup to Coki and Tapia compared to John and Momo. So it feels, I kind of see both sides to the story. It's like, yes, they didn't have a great week because they lost, but they were a point away from making the semis, and I genuinely think they could have done something against Coki and Tapia. So, yeah, I'm a little bit torn, but nonetheless, it is disappointing. I mean, we did see Stupa and Lebron leave the court super quickly after the match, and they just seemed very pissed off. So it's a shame, because I really do want to see them do well for the sake of the race and the number one race, and just the kind of pool of pairs that can win tournaments on a regular basis, because I do think they're at that level. I just think, Stupa has to maybe raise his game a little bit. And hey, maybe Lebron has to be a little bit more patient during those key moments. I know he loves finishing matches with an unbelievable smash or a drop shot and go for those points, but maybe in those situations, you've got to be a bit more conservative and just play it simple. I mean, this is coming from someone who has achieved nothing in paddle to a player who's been number one for four and a bit years. So I think you should probably take this with a pinch of salt. But that's just my thinking after seeing what happened this week. Yeah, but he's still, I agree, he's playing so well. I mean, he's managing the ball so well from the back. He seemed very comfortable on this court. I think Stupa and Lebron play very well, both on slow courts and on fast courts, because they're defensive machines, but also they've both got a very good smash and are very attacking. So I do have big expectations for them, but I think they need a big tournament in Rome to really believe in them as a pair and look beyond this year. And I'm saying they need to beat either Galan or Coki and Tapia soon to really kind of believe in the project beyond this year.
Yeah, or even, to be honest, I think if they, because it feels like the last 2 matches that they lost kind of against both Cardenales Burger and Momo and John, then it feels like obviously they were super pissed off, and that it matters to them a lot. So I think, as you mentioned, because of Stupa's confidence, I think even if they managed to get to the semifinals and in the quarterfinals they beat a kind of lower ranked pair, but one of these Momo, John, that is still like within the top 10 or something, even if they get that win and they get to the semi-final, I think it'll be a huge step for them, especially more for Stupa and his confidence, because as you say, it probably is that, and kind of we can see that in his game, because he's just not as aggressive as he used to be. And even in certain balls where you think this is definitely a ball that you can attack, he doesn't attack them. I know that obviously the conditions now in Buenos Aires weren't the best to hit a smash, but sometimes you could, right? Even I thought, for example, something that was quite good from John Sanz's side is that he was still hitting smashes. It's just like when the ball was, frank to do so and like the right moment to do so. And there were definitely times I thought Stupa had similar situations. And we just saw him play this, very weak bandeja to Momo all the time that, Momo was just able to pick up super easily. So that it's true that like that extra, level of aggressiveness that we see him have so many times, it feels that it's missing. And that's probably due to the confidence you were talking about.
Yeah, and I just think the fact that he's not going for smashes based on the fact that Stupa was probably one of the players that smashed the most. Yeah. I mean, I remember his season where he was challenging for the number one spot with Dineno against Coello and Tapia. I mean, there were so many finals where Stupa was actually having the best smash out of those 4 players. I mean, it was amazing, that kind of one-legged jump smash and the amount of topspin he gets on the ball, and now he's just not going for them. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think Rome will probably be very fast courts, given that it's the summer, it's the heat. And if that's not an ecosystem for Stupa going for loads of smashes, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then maybe moving on, I think I'd like to also talk about Galan, which is obviously obviously super unfortunate for Galan having to retire due to the stomach issues. Because to be honest, I thought that their tournament was amazing. And from a playing perspective, I honestly thought that this time around, if they would have faced Coki and Tapia, that they would have given them serious problems. Obviously, I think the conditions help, and they probably do have a bit of an advantage, given that Chingotto obviously is probably more comfortable in kind of a slower conditions. Just overall, their dominance, I thought, throughout the tournament in the previous matches. I mean, their scores were ridiculous. They were like 6-2, 6-1, basically, like every single pair. It's such a shame because like the way they'd been playing, and even in Asunción, I thought that they played quite well. And the fact that, as we mentioned, maybe Coki and Tapia didn't seem to be like fully right on until obviously like the key moments, as it usually happens, and then they definitely turned the machine on. But I thought it would have been super interesting. I don't know what your thoughts are, Hugo, about how they beat this week.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think their run up to the semi-finals was a lot better than Coello and Tapia's. Now, I know they didn't have the toughest of draws, but then again, Coello and Tapia didn't face Cardenal Burger and didn't face Stupa Lebron. So, and actually, Chingalan absolutely battered Juan Luesbury and Diestro, who had beaten, Coello and Tapia last week. I mean, it was 6-2, 6-1, as you very rightly said. So I thought their run was so much better. They were playing better. And it was just a massive shame that we didn't get to see that final in Buenos Aires, because I do think it would have been one of the better ones, even though recently we've seen Coello and Tapia dominate Chingalan, and sometimes we haven't felt like... It would have been a long one, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
I felt like all matches were above 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think they could have given them a very good run for their money. And I mean, I don't know whether I would put them down as favourites in that encounter, but honestly, I think I would have given it as a 50-50. I don't think I would have gone or favoured Coello and Tapia, given the court conditions, which obviously we know that Chingotto absolutely loves because he can just run around for days. So yeah, it was a shame. But yeah, I mean, looking at that semi-final specifically against Paquito and Lucas Bergamini, as you very rightly said at the start of the episode, it was just felt like Galan and Paquito were walking and Berga and Chingo were running around, but not really going for shots. And I know the court's super slow. I know they were knackered, but that clearly wasn't benefiting Chingalan. And we could hear Jorge Martinez insist throughout all the changeovers, guys, we can't play at this speed because this doesn't benefit us. We have to go for the shots when opportunities and points to attack the ball arise, because Paquito absolutely loves playing at that speed. I mean, he literally said various times throughout the week, I absolutely love this court, etc., because he's just very, very happy kind of staying at the back, using his unbelievable...
He's a bit of a lazy player.
Yeah.
He just walks around the court, basically.
Yeah, his contra paredes are probably the best on court. They're just so effortless. I mean, he can do it backhand, side glass, and it's the perfect lob that you can't attack. So that was the speed he wanted to play at. And I don't know whether it's probably related to the fact that Galan almost felt like he couldn't move. So we got to take this with a pinch of salt. But even in the first set, and throughout the second set where he didn't feel to be super injured, I think they were lacking a bit of an edge there. And particularly given that Chingalan had quite an easy run up until the semi-finals. So I don't think they were that tired physically, but hey, I mean, it's hard to read into it. And yeah, obviously it was a shame because I do think that the final would have been an epic final if they played it, and Paquito and Berga just couldn't compete at all in that final against Coello and Tapia. So it was a shame both for us, and imagine going to the stadium and watching it. I thought it was a bit, boring, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, no, to be honest, definitely, I think one of the most boring matches I've seen. Like, it almost felt like, when we watch ourselves play and, you're like, wow, that feels super slow, and it doesn't look like how professional players do. Honestly, like watching that match, I was like, the ball just feels so heavy and like the players just feel so slow. And as you said, so many times Galan just seemed to be like walking. But I mean, not that any criticism there, of course. I mean, he'd just been playing a couple of hours before the quarterfinal match, and then obviously the stomach issues that he had. It's just more of a thought of like, are these same day matches like even worth it, to be honest? Like, would it be just better to delay it another day? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what players think about it, but it does feel like, you probably don't get the best product or the best match when obviously you're having to play in the same day 2 matches.
No, I agree. I think it was a poor decision. I mean, we don't understand the ins and outs of what it would have implied to move the tournament to Monday and finish on a Monday. But I mean, we've seen it happen various times this year. So I think it would have just made the semi-finals definitely better and the final as well, I think.
And not that the Argentinians wouldn't turn up on a Monday, because they would turn up every single day of the week.
Yeah, they just turn up with a mask on their face and just make up an excuse as to why they can't go to their job and go to the office, and then get found out by the boss. But yeah, it was a shame. I mean, what it does show is that Coki and Yanguas are absolute beasts, because they did have long matches. I mean, that match against Edu Alonso and Jairo was tough. It was long, and they got to the final and they just looked so fresh. They were playing exactly the same paddle exactly the paddle that they wanted to play, which obviously we didn't see from Chingalan. But again, this is mainly focusing on Galan, and he was obviously affected by an injury, whether it was a bug or whatever it was. So we really do hope that he's back to his best for Rome, because it's obviously a major, and that is a huge stepping stone in the number one race.
100%. And maybe to just finish off, I thought that maybe talking a bit about Coki and Tapia would be interesting. Just overall, my feeling is that I can see them. I don't know if they're going to replicate what they did last year in terms of that massive run where they were like undefeated and, they like no one could touch them. And it's just more of a motivation type like feeling, because it does feel like the run up until, the moments that they really needed to turn it on, they just weren't, it just feel like they weren't up for it, to be honest, a lot of the times. And I just think, like, obviously we discussed this offline, it's so hard to stay motivated, week after week after week, and you're still kind of comfortably ahead in terms of, the number one spot. So it's not like you have an imminent challenge in front of you. So I don't know, what are your thoughts overall, like from here to the end of the year? Like, could you expect them to lose, kind of here and there, or do you expect a similar dominance that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I do think that they're probably suffering from a bit of not demotivation, lack of motivation to a certain extent, because they have a 10,000, I checked it this morning, 10,000 points gap between them and Chingalan. It's as big as Chingalan's with respect to Stupa and Lebron. And when you think about, or when probably fans think about how close Chingalan are to Coello and Tapia, they probably don't think that they're as close as Stupa and Lebron are to Chingalan. I mean, they probably think that the gap is a lot smaller between Chingalan and Coello and Tapia, and now it isn't. So, yeah, I mean, I think they do look a little bit less motivated. I think particularly in that first set of the quarterfinals match against Edu Alonso and Jairo, they were just kind of going through the motions, and they lost that first set. And I do think that from then onwards, they turned it around, and Tapia started screaming, which we know when Tapia's screaming, you're in trouble, because he's pumped and he's going to start producing his magic. And obviously they ended the match really well. They spanked them in the third set, and then hey, I mean they won in the straight sets in the semi-final and the final. So they have been dominant. I think whether they go on a massive run this season is going to depend on whether they need to do it. I think if the next few weeks, say the majors won by Galan, for example, and Galan have a bit of a good run, or Coki and Tapia don't win the next two tournaments, then I can probably see them kind of turning their MVP mode back on and saying, guys, if we want to retain this spot and we want to stay as the number ones for another year, we're going to have to turn it up. But if, say, for example, they win the Rome major, I mean, they're not going to have a lot of pressure for a number of months, really, because they would have won all the majors that have been played so far. So I think it's going to depend on how the next few tournaments go, and also how well Galan, because if Galan don't match, at the very least, Coello and Tapia's results, then Coello and Tapia really have zero pressure. So that's my feeling, but I don't know whether you agree.
No, yeah, I mean, it does feel like it feels like they've got another gear which they can go to. And then, last year as well, kind of their run seemed like it came off the back of Galan actually being at an incredible level and being ahead of them in the head-to-head, right? So obviously, I think that catapulted, both Tapia and Coello to produce this incredible run and kind of finish off the season really strongly. As you say, now it just feels like with all the tournaments that have gone by, it feels like they have kind of a comfort lead. So let's see how these next couple of tournaments develop. But it definitely feels like they've got like another gear which they can go to. And at the moment, they're not necessarily kind of putting it all out there. I feel like it's certainly like, overall, definitely they are doing it obviously in specific moments and when they have to and when they're under pressure. I mean, they're obviously showing that they are the number ones and the best pair in the world without a doubt. But let's see, I think it's going to be interesting how they continue about this. But obviously very much, as you said, related to how Galan do and how much of a threat kind of they feel like is coming from them.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So I think that probably brings us to the end of the episode. Obviously, maybe a bit of a longer one, but I do hope that everyone enjoyed it. I mean, I thought we talked about some very interesting topics, and obviously I thought the Buenos Aires P1 gave a lot to talk about, and some surprising wins here and there, and overall the South American tour I thought has been great. But now we head back to Europe, and obviously we talked about the fact that we've got the Rome Major coming up. Is it next week, I think, right?
Yes, so it's starting on for June, so next week, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, tune into that because obviously that's one of the big tournaments in the year, and I think that will probably kind of set up quite a bit kind of how the rest of the season will go and how the players will push on. So I do hope everyone's enjoyed it. Please do leave a like and a comment, and as always, Hugo, it's been a pleasure, and good luck, by the way. Hope you smash them, and yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Thanks very much, Gonz. I'll let you know how we do. And cheers, guys, for listening. Please leave your thoughts, comments. We very much appreciate them. And have a great week. Catch you very soon.